The following podcast contains graphic content and graphic language. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Devin Zahn, and welcome to episode 10 of Tales for the Dark, Creepy Internet Stories. As always, we got a jam-packed episode with 3 different stories today, one being a creepypasta, one being a true crime, and one being a cryptid. As always, we're going to start off with our house cleaning, and that is going to start with dad jokes. As always, we have a couple dad jokes to kind of lighten the mood before we get into the darker stuff that is to follow in this episode. So starting with the first one, these are a couple ones from Twitter, so here we go. After kissing my girlfriend on the sofa, she said, "Let's take this upstairs." "Okay," I said. "You grab one end and I'll grab the other." It's pretty decent. It's unique. Not, the best, but still pretty, it made me chuckle. Next one. My neighbors listen to great music, whether they like it or not. That I can relate to. But I'm kind of the person that's getting forced to listen to music, because my neighbor blasts music a lot, so a lot of it's good music though, so that's a good thing. According to a recent survey, men say the first thing they notice about a woman is her eyes. Women say the first thing they notice about men is that they are a bunch of liars. I don't know if I get that one. Maybe it just went over my head, but Alright, next we got, what do you call birds that stick together? Velcros. That one I actually really do like. And the last one for this episode is, how much money does a mountain goat have? About 4 legs of ram. Clever. So those are definitely dad jokes. Not always funny, but it does make you go, really? So those are our dad jokes for this episode. After this now, we are going to be getting into our taste test for this episode, and that is something that's going to be fairly unique. So let me pull it out real fast. Alright, so for our taste test for today, we have 2 unique suckers, candy suckers, from, looks like Mexico, just because the first sucker has like a pickle with a sombrero, so it's Rico Pepino Super et Altino, I should say, and this is a pickle sucker with what appears to be like peppers kind of sprinkled right in with it. So let's figure out how we open this thing. Oh, yeah, there we go. Just a little tear on the back here. There we go. Oh, and it's sticky. Great. That's great. Okay, so this is the pickle sucker. Oh, it smells disgusting. Okay. I do not know how I feel about that. It's spicy, believe it or not. It does have the dill pickle kind of flavor. A little sweeter than you'd expect, but it's definitely got a little heat to it. I do not think I would recommend this, though. It is not really the best thing in the world. Okay. Oh god, I got nowhere to put it. Great thinking ahead, Devin. You know, that's honestly okay. I don't think I'm going to finish this. Alright, so we got one more sucker from the same package. Oh, this one's going to be interesting. Okay. So this is a watermelon with pepper pop. Oh, and that has a pretty unique flavor, or smell. Oh my god. No. What is that? It even looks like poop. It's gonna be a hard pass on that one. Don't. It's got this like very sour kind of coating on it that you can just kind of like almost scrape off with your teeth. So that's gonna be a hard pass. I am gonna have to get that taste out of my mouth pretty quickly here. So between the two suckers, the dill pickle one, I'd probably give a 5. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not something I would have every day. The watermelon one, very disappointing. I'd give that a 2. So with that, we are done with our house cleaning for this episode. So we are going to jump right into our first story, which is our creepypasta story. And this one is actually one of my personal favorites. It's based off of a video game a lot of you may know and love, Pokemon. This is the creepypasta entitled Zombreon. A friend once told me that there was supposed to be 4 new evolutions for Evvee in Pokemon Gold and Silver. The 2 that are already in the game are Espeon, a Psychic type, and Umbreon, a Dark type. The other 2 were dropped from the game. These were Poison and Ghost types. I wasn't convinced this was true, so I decided to see for myself by trying a beta version of Pokemon Gold. The beta ROM was hard to find, because most of the ROMs were either normal, Japanese, or didn't work. When I finally found one that worked, I loaded it up to search for new Evvee evolutions. I wasn't quite sure what to do to get Evvee to evolve into the Poison or Ghost types, so I just played the game normally and figured I would find out at some point. I eventually ended up beating the Elite Four and all of Kanto. The game was pretty much the same, other than a few different locations, dialogue, etc. Oh, and Dunsparce didn't seem to appear. But I won't complain too much about that. I really didn't like Dunsparce. But by the time I beat the game, I still hadn't figured out how to evolve my Evvee. I tried leveling up at night, day, in caves, etc. After hours of trying, I finally decided to find the evolutions the easy way, by cheating. I tried to use GameShark codes, but most of them did nothing. So I decided to ask for help online, and someone on Newgrounds said he could work on a code that should give me all the items. After a few days, he sent me back a code that I put into GameShark. I loaded the beta ROM, and sure enough, the code gave me every item in the game. I looked through the items and everything was the same, except for an item called Toxic Stone. I knew this was the item I was looking for, so I used it on my Evvee, and nothing happened. The game simply told me, it has no effect. I tried over and over, but nothing. I was pissed. Was this all I got after I went through this damn game? There had to be something that I did wrong, so I thought maybe other NPCs could help me out. I got the typical text from them, though. Man, that Team Rocket sure is persistent. I love my Jigglypuff. Have you visited the radio tower in the Kanto region? But one NPC told me something that stood out. Did you know there's a stone that can evolve a Pokemon after it's fated? That's where I went wrong. I had to use the Toxic Stone on my Evvee after it died. At least, I hope so. My Evvee didn't take any time to be defeated, especially since it was around level 40 and I was in a level 60 area. After it was defeated, I went into my bag and used the stone on my fainted Evvee. What's this? Evvee is evolving. Yes, finally! Evvee has evolved into Zombreon. This was not what I was thinking. Zombreon looked like a normal Evvee, but was just green colored and parts of it were missing. Also, its cry was just a lower version of Eevee's. Oh, and once it evolved, It learned an attack called Zombite, but this was all I worked for? A recolored Evvee? Come on! I calmed down a bit and decided to test it out in the tall grass near New Barktown. A wild centret appeared, and I threw out Zombreon. I figured it would be pointless to use a move I have used a million times, like Tackle or Flash, so I tried Zombite instead. The attack animation was odd. It looked like Bite, but with two poison symbols flashing near the teeth. The attack was a one-hit KO, according to the text box, but what was strange now was that the game asked me if I would like to nickname Centret, and it told me Centret was sent to the PC. I didn't use a Pokeball, so why did the game say I caught the Centret? I rushed over to the PC and checked for the Centret. It was not a normal Centret anymore, though. It was now green, a poison type, and it had the move Zombite. Wait, I know what's going on. Every time I use the attack Zombite, which I figure means zombie bite, the enemy Pokemon will get infected, joining my team. This was pretty obvious considering Zombreon was basically zombie plus Eon. I wondered, what would happen if I infected a trainer's Pokemon? I used Fly to go to one of the routes in Kanto that I skipped most of, and ran into a trainer. The battle started, and the opposing trainer threw out a Kadabra, and I immediately chose Zombite. It was a one-hit KO, but rather than throwing out the next Pokemon, the opposing trainer just came out and said, "What did you do to my Pokemon?" The battle was won, and I received the XP and money. After the battle, the trainer was simply gone. Just gone. In fact, none of the other trainers were there. This began to creep me out a little. I walked around the area to look for another trainer, but found nothing. When I walked into the grass, a wild Kadabra appeared. Although this wasn't a normal Kadabra. It was green and zombie-like. Like the Centret was, but I didn't even have to fight it. It just lost all its health, and the game told me I caught it. I began to get a little creeped out, so I began to head back to town when another wild Pokemon appeared. It was a normal-looking Raticate. I didn't want to fight it, so I pressed run. It didn't work. Zombreon is staring at the foe hungrily, the game told me. Then the Raticate attacked Zombreon with Bite, but after the attack animation played, the game said Zombreon countered the attack with Zombite, and the Zombite animation played, causing the Raticate to lose all its HP and join my team. I wanted to get out of this area immediately, so I went into my team to use Fly. I wasn't expecting what I saw. All of my Pokemon were green and zombified, and all of them now knew Zombite. It made my Lugia use Fly and take me to Saffron City. When I got there, all of the NPCs were there, which helped me to relax a little bit. I decided to go into the Pokemon Center and check the PC, and when I did, the game let out an ear-splitting beep that made me jump a little. In front of the center's counter was the trainer with the Kadabra that I defeated earlier. A text box came up. "That's the man that hurt my Kadabra." Then the trainer ran to the corner of the Pokemon Center. A man sitting on one of the seats walked up to me and said, "Don't worry, I'll stop him." Then I was forced to battle him. He sent out an Arcanine and I sent out Zombreon. I tried to use Tackle and it worked. But after the animation finished, the game said, Zombreon used Tackle, followed by Zombite. The battle ended, and when the game went back to the Pokemon Center, a greenish sprite of the Arcanine stood next to the man. "What happened to my Arcanine? What are you?" the man said before running out of the Pokemon Center. The Arcanine walked up to me. The game told me that Arcanine was sent to the PC box, and then the Arcanine disappeared. This was starting to get kind of creepy. I tried talking to the trainer in the corner, but all he would say was, "Please, no more." I tried talking to the nurse, but all she would say was, "Get out of my Pokemon Center." I checked the PC, and sure enough, I had zombie versions of all the Pokemon from earlier. When I backed out of the PC, I noticed a new option on the PC screen called Release All. I tried pressing it, but it told me, not enough Zom Pokemon. Darn. I walked out of the center, and the speakers of my computer were filled with a loud barrage of high and low-pitched beeps, and all of the NPCs outside of the center ran towards the exits of the city. I tried to talk to one of them, but they were moving too fast to do anything. When I walked out of town, there were no trainers around. I figured if I went to a different town, everything would be normal, so I made my Lugia fly to Goldenrod City. When I landed there were no NPCs here either, and the music wasn't playing. I tried walking into a building, but the game told me the door is locked. I tried a few other buildings, but those were locked too, so I went to the Pokemon Center. The door opened as usual, and I went inside. Nobody was inside of it, but I noticed something new. There was what appeared to be a radio on the counter. When I interacted with it, a text box came up. Beware of strange Pokemon trainers from the Kanto region, because they've been reporting strange green Pokemon attacking and infecting other Pokemon trainers. Remain indoors and avoid all contact with strange Pokemon and people. Followed by, I'm so lonely. I figured there was nothing to do down here, so I walked to the second floor. On the second floor, there were a bunch of NPCs standing still facing the stairs. Once I got to the top of the stairs, a loud beep played and a text box said, Get out here. You aren't normal. A trainer standing in front of the crowd ran up to me and a battle started. The opposing trainer sent out a Ditto, and I sent out Zombrion. I tried using Flash, but instead, the game said Zombrion spat poison at Ditto, and Ditto was defeated. After the battle, the man backed up into the crowd. Suddenly, Zombrion walked out, and the game said, Zombrion can't wait any longer. And Zombrion ran into the crowd, touching every trainer and Pokemon. When it touched Pokemon, they would turn green, but when it touched trainers, the game let out a loud beep, and then the trainer would disappear. Once all the trainers were gone, and all the Pokemon were infected, a text box said, Jigglypuff, Abra, Ditto, and Clefairy were sent to the PC. Then the Pokemon disappeared. I checked my trainer card because I remember the trainer from earlier saying I wasn't normal. Sure enough, my trainer was zombified too. I felt kinda sick. Would Game Freak really do something like this? I shook off the feeling and tried to fly to a different town, but the game told me Lugia is too weak to fly. Great. I went back into the center to get a new flying Pokemon from the PC, but when I looked inside, all of the Pokemon in my PC were infected. I tried taking out my Pidgeotto, but pressing the withdraw button would just play a buzz sound that usually played when you aren't allowed to do something. I couldn't move Pokemon either, so there was really only one more thing I could do. I saved the game first, then I pressed the Release All button. The game asked, Would you like to release all Zom Pokemon? Yes? All Zom Pokemon have been released. I checked the box, and now all my Pokemon in the PC were gone. I was confused. What is the purpose of an option like this? I walked outside, and I got quite the surprise. Parts of buildings were on fire, windows were boarded up, and NPCs were running from green Pokemon. I couldn't interact with the Pokemon or trainers, so I decided to walk out of town. The area outside of town was similar in a way. A few trees were on fire, and there were gray particles moving in front of the screen, which made it look like the screen was all smoky. Walking into tall grass didn't cause wild Pokemon to appear, but I could talk to the small amount of NPCs that were standing around. They would say things like, I had hit my poor Pikachu with a stick. He just wouldn't stop trying to bite me. And, who started this? And, I want this all to end. I want to go home to my family. I eventually walked to Violet City, then to Cherry Grove City, and finally to New Barktown. This was the only place that was normal. Well, sort of. The trainers that walked around outside the buildings weren't there anymore. I went into the laboratory to see if it was empty too. It wasn't. Inside was a single professor. Once I took a step forward, an exclamation point appeared above his head, and he walked up to me. I finally finished it. A gene that protects my Pokemon from that poison stuff that has caused all the Pokemon to turn strange. This is where it all began, and this is where it will all end, he said, causing a battle to start. The game said that Prof.Elm would like to battle. He sent out a level 86 Feraligatr. I threw out Zombreon. I knew Zombreon was too weak to handle this, so I switched to Lugia. When I tried to use any attack other than Zombite, Lugia would end up using it anyways, and when Lugia did, I would get a message that said, "It has no effect on Feraligatr." After this, the opposing Feraligatr used an attack called Cure that was super effective and defeated Lugia right away. My next Pokemon was my Typhlosion, but the battle was the same as it went for Lugia. I tried using Flamethrower, but instead, Typhlosion used Zombite, and was instantly defeated by Cure. The battle went on like this until I got to Zombreon. I pressed Zombite at this point because I knew it was coming. It didn't work, and Feraligatr used Cure. Zombreon was brought down to 1 HP. The game said, Zombreon refuses to give up. Zombreon used Struggle. Feraligatr was instantly defeated, and Zombreon was defeated by the recoil. Professor Elm came up and said, "No, no, no!" And the battle ended. After the battle, Elm took a step back and said, "I lost. It's over. It's all over. I want to end this pointless game right now." And then he ran out of the lab. After a few seconds, a text box appeared. You hear a loud bang in the distance. I think I know what that meant. I went outside and a text box came up saying, "Why did this have to happen?" I didn't understand who said this, since there was nobody around. I thought maybe someone was in my character's house, so I headed there. Inside was my mom. She was sitting on a chair in the house as usual, so I tried interacting with her. She definitely wasn't doing anything usual. "It's Mom. She's not moving." This text actually made me feel sad, but I didn't expect the screen to cut to black after the text box closed. The screen faded from black into the opening scene where you get to enter your character's name, but my character just stood there and the text below said, "All of this is my fault. All those poor people. My mom, Evvee." But was it really my fault? The character glared back at the screen for a second, and it cut to black. Then the game went straight to the credits. Nothing was different. All the Pokemon were there as usual. Once the credits were over, the emulator froze. Now whenever I try to load the battle ROM, the emulator just freezes and closes. I realized that this was only one of the 2 evolutions for Evvee that never got released. The Ghost one was probably in Pokemon Silver. I can't imagine what would have happened with this evolution of Evvee, and frankly, I don't want to know. Alright, so that is our first story for this episode. That is our creepypasta story, and it's entitled Zombreon. Very good story. This is actually one of the first creepypastas I've ever heard or read, and it's actually kind of what got me into reading these more, and part of the reason that I actually read these on the podcast. So this one is based off of a video game called Pokemon Gold. So, as you probably got from the story. But, in this one, we see an alternate game, a beta game, which is a pretty common thing for authors to use in their gaming creepypastas, is they get it via a beta ROM, or they get it at a garage sale. It's a unmarked case at a game store. But this one is actually pretty good. I mean, it is a little cliche on getting it started, but the story itself was fantastic. It is kind of creepy, and you know it's fake because it's a video game, but it still kind of even gives the reader that sense of fear and anticipation, because this is actually kind of morbid. I mean, having a video game go haywire and all the NPCs start being afraid of you when it's a game that's supposed to be cheerful and for kids, it's terrifying. There are screenshots for this, which I will probably post on the page at the time of release, because the author did actually do screenshots and screen captures based off of this. And this has actually sparked a lot of, emulators and game designers online and modders and stuff to make versions of this for people to play. You might be able to just Google it right now and find a ROM, and you can get this to play on your computer. It is terrifying, and the creepypasta is probably longer than the actual game. I have actually played this in the past a little bit, but it wasn't completely done at the time. So, it is a good story. There are a few grammatical errors in there, as always. I had to ad-lib a little bit to make it seem like it makes a little bit more sense. But it was really good. I mean, the idea of Evvee having this alternate evolution that kind of turns the game into a completely different type of game is fascinating, terrifying, and honestly, I'd play it. But what would I give the story as a whole? This was a pretty medium-length story, so I will give it credit for that, because we have read very short creepypastas, and we have read very, very long creepypastas. There's actually a creepypasta out there about a cave diver that probably would take the entire length of a full episode. I might do that someday, but I don't know, I'm not looking forward to that. This is a good story, and I wanted to stay away from video game creepypastas on this podcast because, not everyone's into video games, and some people are going to hear this and think, oh my god, that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. But this one is actually really decent. Well written, very good story. I mean, it has build up. It freaks you out pretty much every second you're hearing it. And yeah, it was good. I think I would give this story a solid 8 out of 10, actually. It's good. It's really good. I would recommend reading it for yourself. I actually got this one off of the person I originally heard this from. He has a Wikipedia site. It's SomeOrdinaryGamers.fandom.com/wiki/Zombrion. And this was written by Ralzor123. So, 8 out of 10. This is fantastic. And honestly, it's pretty cool. It's a cool concept. I would definitely play a Pokemon game that had this type of evolution in it. And it leaves it open for a sequel, because he did mention there was a second one that was a ghost type that was on Pokemon Silver. So he definitely left it open. So I'm hoping for a sequel, but this was written a long time ago. So it's very possible we may never see a sequel. So 8 out of 10. So from here we move on to our true crime case for the episode, and that is the Massacre of Columbine. On April 20th, 1999, a tragedy struck Columbine High School, an otherwise normal day that left not only an entire country, but the entire world in a state of shock and fear, when 2 teenagers went on a shooting spree, killing 13 and injuring over 20 others. But as well known as this tragedy is, not too many know the details of what happened that fateful day. Columbine was the worst school shooting in U.S. history at the time, and was the turning point in the debate of gun control in the country and the subsequent school shootings that followed over the years that only added fuel to the desire to tackle this issue. Alongside the movement for gun control, authorities went to work investigating the motivation of 17-year-old Dylan Klebold and 18-year-old Eric Harris and their horrific actions. But this is what we know. At 11:19 a.m. that day, Harris and Klebold, dressed in trench coats, opened fire on students outside the school before entering the school to continue their assault, where they committed most of the murders in the school library. In 16 minutes' time, the pair had killed a teacher, 12 students, and injured an additional 20. 25 minutes later, around 12 noon, the 2 teens turned the guns on themselves, killing themselves. Investigators discovered later on that Harris and Klebold had arrived in separate vehicles around 11:10 a.m., where they both entered the school cafeteria with 2 large duffel bags. The bags contained two 20-pound bombs to which they placed and set to detonate at 11:17 a.m. The pair then went back outside to wait for the explosions. When the makeshift bombs didn't go off, they got their guns and began their Plan B. These were the victims of the Columbine Massacre. Cassie Bernal, who was 17. Stephen Corneau, who was 14. Corey DePuter, who was 17. Kelly Fleming, who was 16. Matthew Ketcher, who was 16. Daniel Mauser, who was 15. Daniel Warbrough, who was 15. William Sanders, who was 47. Rachel Scott, who was 17. Isaiah Scholes, who was 18. John Tomlin, who was 16. Lauren Townsend, who was 18. And Kyle Velasquez, who was 16. As always, my condolences to the victims and their families. In the days after the shooting, rumors were floating around that Harris and Klebold purposefully targeted athletes, minorities, and Christians. Initially, it was reported that victim Cassie Bernal was asked by one of the two if she believed in God. When she said yes, she was killed. Her parents later released a book entitled She Said Yes. This was later revealed to not be Cassie, but another student, who was already injured. Although it wasn't Cassie, the fact it still happened is terrifying in itself. When the victim said yes, the shooter shot her and walked away. Investigators eventually determined no specific group of people were targeted, as the bombs would have killed upwards of hundreds. Rumors also surfaced that the killers were associated with the Trenchcoat Mafia, which was an outcast group made up of primarily goths, but it was also speculated that they carried out the massacre because they were being bullied. Many blamed music and video games for their motives, but this theory has been disproven. Journals left by the pair describe plans for the bombing and shootings up to a year in advance, just like the Oklahoma bombing. A 2009 book by Dave Cullen entitled Columbine described Harris being, quote, the callously brutal mastermind, while Klebold was, quote, a quivering depressive who journaled obsessively about love and attended the Columbine prom 3 days before opening fire. The massacre sparked a fire across the country for not only gun control, but for more safety for our children and citizens. This controversial topic still burns strong today, but the scars left in the communities surrounding Columbine remain. Many of the victims' families filed suits against the school, but most were dismissed, and the man who sold Harris the gun and ammo was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Columbine turned the world upside down, bringing us into a world where we don't even know if our children are safe, and the debate has carried on even now. The 13 victims will be remembered and thought about forever, but it begs the question, are we safe anywhere? Alright, so that's our Columbine research. Not really a lot to research on this one, actually. I think I'm at 6 minutes right now, which really isn't a whole lot, because there really wasn't that much of a backstory to this. We don't really know a whole lot about Klebold and Harris's, past, their history, if they got bullied and to the extent of how much they were bullied, or if they just were two psychopaths that found each other and came up with a very sick plan to become the most infamous people they could be. But this has inspired a lot of situations in pop culture and media, including the show American Horror Story, and that would be season 1 with the character Tate, played by Evan Peters, when he went on a rampage shooting spree at his school, and it actually took place in a library that was heavily influenced by Columbine. And Columbine, like I said, sparked a huge debate within the country about gun control. And that goes both ways. I mean, even I go back and forth on it myself. We need more gun control, yes, but it's still our right to own a gun to defend ourselves, But I think I'm not going to get into the politics of this, but Columbine really sparked this revolution in America about should we put more restrictions on guns? What can we do to keep our children safe in their classes? Because, I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's kind of sad that it's a rare day not to see another school shooting on the news, which is kind of what it's become. But Columbine is kind of the spark that lit the tinderbox, with Harris and Klebold. Again, they killed themselves, so they were never tried and found guilty, but it's pretty obvious they did it. 13 victims, including a teacher, most of which were in the library. It's sad, and it could have been so much worse, which is even more horrible to say, because they initially planned to bomb the entire school, but those bombs didn't go off. So, I mean, in hindsight, 13 people is a lot less collateral than 200 or hundreds more than that, But what do I think of Columbine? I wish there was more information on it. There's not really a lot out there because no one really knows what their home life was like. And even the book written by the parents of one of the victims, Carrie, I believe, the one who said she believed in God, who didn't say she believed in God, that was proven false, but it still happened. One of the victims actually did say, was asked that, and said yes, and she was subsequently shot for it, which is terrifying. It's just terrifying. But that is Columbine. If I find more information, I might come back to this, because this was a very short research topic, but that's pretty much all I could find. I might actually do just an episode purely on school shootings, and we can cover this again alongside the other ones like Sandy Hook and Virginia Tech, because these are very tragic events, and I think the fact that they're labeled school shootings kind of deters a lot of true crime junkies away, because it's normalized now by the media. So, and I think that's not right. But with that being said, we are done with the true crime case. I'm not giving it a score as always, because it is a real life topic, and I'm not going to be like, hey, this is the best murder, 10 out of 10. But from here, we are going to be moving on to our cryptid topic for this episode, and that is going to be something that actually has terrified me for a very long time, that I thought just only existed in video games, but apparently it is an actual legend and myth out of Mongolia. So this is the Mongolian death worm. We all have irrational fears, but what if there was a legend to back it up? For me, it's a giant worm with razor-sharp teeth coming up from the ground below, which is why this next cryptid terrified me more than anything we've covered before, the Mongolian death worm. A gigantic legend said to dwell under the sands of the Gobi Desert, the Mongolian death worm is said to be fairly large with multiple sets of razor-sharp teeth. In a 2002 book written by Carl Schucker entitled The Unexplained, an illustrated guide to the world's paranormal mysteries, Schucker is quoted as saying, "One of the world's most sensational creatures may be concealed amid the sands of the southern Gobi Desert. It is said to resemble a fat worm, up to 1 meter or 3 feet long, and dark in color, with spike-like projections at both ends. It spends much of its time hidden beneath the desert sands, but whenever one is spotted lying on the surface, it is scrupulously avoided by the locals." The Mongolian deathworm is known by locals as Olgoi korkoi, which is loosely translated as large intestine worm. It is said it can kill its prey in various terrifying ways, such as spitting a stream of venomous spit, which is lethal to anything it hits. But it is also said the worm can electrocute its victims from a distance, although there is no first-hand accounts of encountering the worm. Despite the legends, many have traveled into the Gobi Desert to seek out the cryptid, but nothing has ever turned up over the various expeditions into the desert. The worm has been the inspiration for many monsters in modern media, such as a mission from the game Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. A lot of people who believe in the worm's existence agree there is no solid evidence of its existence, but rather believe it to have some basis of historical truth, as many of the stories throughout history are very similar. Although it is very possible these stories throughout history are just a product of legends being passed from generation to generation. With virtually no evidence, however, many believe this legend to just be that, a legend. Some cited how there's at least some dismissible evidence to the Bigfoot legend, but nothing on stories from the Mongolian deathworm. Besides that, if they were to exist, there would be remains to be found in the desert, but nothing has been recovered, although the locals believe discovering proof of the worm could prove very lucrative. Many theories point to the worm not being a worm at all, rather a large legless lizard or snake that can burrow underground, leading believers to think the worm has a spine and therefore should be easily identifiable through fossils, but again, no evidence has ever turned up. All in all, the Mongolian deathworm is a legend that still terrifies the people of Mongolia and the Gobi Desert. With little evidence to support the cryptid, it's safe to say there's no need to fear about running into one. But it still makes you think, are you really safe on dry land? Alright, and that is all I could dig up on the Mongolian deathworm. And I know that's literally like 3.5 minutes of content right there. But this thing actually really terrifies the crap out of me, and I'll tell you why. Even with as little information as I was able to dig up on it, this thing has many theories, many thoughts on what it could actually be, or if it even exists. Honestly, I don't believe it exists, but I do believe there could be something like this out there. Just maybe not this particular worm. So, one of my biggest fears is actually from the game I mentioned in my research, Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. There's a mission where you crash land on a sandy planet, and there's this giant worm that follows you around and will literally just jump up out of the ground and eat you. And that's exactly what this worm looked like in the pictures that I found online, but the description it gives in the actual story itself kinda make me question that. They say it's about 1 meter long, so that's about 3 feet. A yardstick, that's what it is. It's a very thick red worm with these spiky things on each end of it, and it has razor sharp teeth, and it can spit venom at you. But the thing where they lose me is it can electrocute a person from a distance, like an eel. Eels don't electrocute from a distance. And I don't think I know of anything that can electrocute from a distance unless you have a stun gun. That being said, what do I think of the Mongolian deathworm? Like I said, probably one of my biggest fears is a giant worm with razor-sharp teeth coming out of the ground to eat me. But if it can spit venom, that's pretty terrifying. The electrocution thing, don't buy it. And that makes me kind of think this thing is very far-fetched. This is a cryptid, just like Slenderman, just like Bigfoot. But the thing is, they have evidence on Bigfoot, whether it be fake or not. I'm not going to dispute that in this episode. Probably be something for another episode. But there is literally nothing but legends and stories for the Mongolian deathworm. And no one has ever recovered a body or seen one in person. Especially if they think it has a spine, there would be evidence, or at least a fossil, left behind from ancient times. So, what do I think of the Mongolian deathworm? I think there's nothing to worry about. I do not think this exists. At least, if it does, not in the Gobi Desert. And if it does, God help us all, because that is the most terrifying thing I've ever heard of. But, not much research on this, not much story to it, so I'm going to say it's not real. But it is very interesting, and it makes for a very terrifying story to think about when you're trying to go to bed tonight. Just think about that worm laying under your bed that's going to snap up and snatch you. I'm kidding. But that ends the third and final story for this episode. We are going to be moving into our closing topics, our new listeners, and then I sign off for the day, and we'll see you in the next episode. So I'm going to pull up the new listeners first, and we'll read off some new listeners. First up on our list of new listeners today is Ashley W., followed by Mike T. Then we have Joe S. Then we have Emily J. Then we have Jared H. Stephanie B. Josh H. Sindel M. Autocorrect. I gotta love it. Joey T. and Alma M. So we have a decent amount of new listeners this time around for the podcast. And, we keep continuing to grow. So, as always, thank you guys for joining the community and joining the podcast group. But, if you guys want to send in suggestions, new topics, feel free to send me that over Facebook. Otherwise, I do have an email set up at talesforthedarkcis@gmail.com. We will also have a new mini-sode coming out in between this episode and the next main episode with a bunch more Let's Not Meet stories, so stick around for that. But yeah, if you guys want to message me personally, give some critiques, give some suggestions, you can find us at Tales for the Dark-Creepy Internet Stories on Facebook. Otherwise, I also am on Castbox under the same name, Tales for the Dark. And I also do have the email that I mentioned before, talesforthedarkcis@gmail.com. So that is our show for today. It's not exactly as lengthy as it usually is, but we chose some very weird topics today with not a whole lot of information on them. So if you guys have better suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, that's all we got for today. So, from my little bat cave here in my little bedroom, my name is Devin Zahn, and this is Tales for the Dark. I will see you guys in the next episode.